Hi there, my name's Craig Hauser, and I'm here to talk to you about the eye, the hand, the mind, and my role in helping to create the book. Uh, Susan Ball asked me to write the chapter on the publications of the College Art Association. And to tell you the truth, I'm sure I was not the first one that she asked. In fact, I'm sure she asked many people and she got a lot of no's. And the reason why is that the task was very daunting. It is very difficult to talk about a history of a publication. And the reason why she asked me was because we had worked together at College Art Association, and I was the first in-house editor. I had worked there for 3 years, and I did know the history of the publications to a degree. And so she approached me. I decided I would say yes. And in order to handle this daunting task, one of the ideas that we came up with was that I would talk to numerous editors-in-chief and executive editors, etc., and sort of see what they thought in terms of the history of the publications, but also maybe they would single out, important scholarship that they had helped produce during their reign as editor. And what happened is none of them wanted to do that. They actually all ended up talking to me about their job and the issues at stake with being an editor of a journal for an academic society. And I could relate because I had been the in-house editor and understood many of their concerns. So what I ended up doing as I was producing the chapter is I started to read the minutes of the College Art Association Board of Directors. And back in the 1920s and 30s, they're fascinating. And they're written like a script. It's as if you're reading a play. And you can see individual personalities emerge. You can see conflicts that might be arising between different members of the board. And I found that kind of fascinating. And then also, I was reading a lot of historiography, and I started to notice that some of the claims in historiography were not always really true. They didn't necessarily play out, and I became aware of myth-making. And I noticed also in my research that sometimes institutions, just in general, for, history, there is myth-making involved. And Elizabeth Mansfield has a book, Art History and Its Institution, Foundations of a Discipline. And she didn't look at College Art Association, but she looked at all sorts of other institutions. And she herself talked about mythologizing and the importance of not doing that. And so she wanted to have more of a critical perspective. And that stayed with me as I was doing my research. I also came across important articles that sort of set the tone for how something like art history was being discussed. And I remember one being Erwin Panofsky's 3 Decades of Art History. And in that text, he talks about these sort of this pre-World War II phase and makes many claims. He does allude to conflicts, but he never really grapples with them. And when I started reading letters that he was exchanging with people here in the United States, say fellow board members at College Art Association, and just other letters, I noticed that there was a real there were some big issues that were taking place, and it was important to think about maybe how Panofsky himself might have been actually mythologizing his own experience as a German Jewish immigrant in the United States. The United States was a much better place for him to be, say, than back in Germany where he was from, but there was anti-Semitism here in the United States, and what did he confront exactly, and what did his German colleagues confront when they arrived too? So I talk about in the book a 1936 letter in which many members of the College Art Association protest because too many Europeans are being published in Art Bulletin, and they don't think it's fair. They sort of see Art Bulletin as their sole outlet for publication, and they want to be, have the right to be published there. And it was a really xenophobic letter. It's not necessarily anti-Semitic at all. I never found anything anti-Semitic. That doesn't mean that the United States wasn't anti-Semitic at the time. It just was very different than what was going on in Europe. I also became interested in just social history in general. And I thought about the Great Depression and its impact upon CAA. What transpired? What did it have to do to financially survive? And those became big issues. So what I did is I took this chapter and I turned it into my dissertation. And I had no idea that was going to transpire, but it became this sort of rich history when I set it against this social historical backdrop, when I thought about institutional critique, and I just thought about like what was happening in publishing in general in academic societies. And so uh, I turned a chapter, I don't know how many pages it was, into a dissertation of around about 300 pages. And again, it's really just the early years in that dissertation, um, mostly the 1910s, 1920s, and 1930s. And it was very rich, very interesting to deal with. And it was a fascinating exercise. So it's great that we're celebrating the 10-year anniversary, and I hope that you have a chance to read my chapter and other chapters in The Eye, the Hand, the Mind. And if you want to check out my dissertation, it's at the City University of New York Community Graduate Center on deposit, and you can check it out on the shelves there if you want to learn more. And I think it's important to be thinking about publications, academic societies, and how this field is really transforming. It's not static. Many changes have happened throughout the 21st century, and I'm curious what will unfold in the future ahead. Thanks very much, and I appreciate your listening.